Yeah, you think I'm scared to get caught, saying something ridiculous on camera? You think I'm scared? I ain't
Yep.
scared. I'm never
No, you don't.
scared.
No.
Go ahead,
And you know
record me. I
what?
end up with a Hulk Hogan tape. That's some good malt liquor. All right. So, hey guys, welcome to a. No,
Are you serious now?
I'm always serious. Welcome to another episode of Nightmare Room. Sorry, guys. I, of course, am one of your hosts, Decon, here with the very, very shaking her head in disapproval.
Actually, horrible.
And
No,
today's
yawning and
episode,
stretching.
and today's episode, I'm always awake. And today's episode, what? Yeah, I guess I'm
Tell
doing
me,
the
tell
solo now.
me.
So today's episode is on how to communicate with the dead, or the communication with the dead, or necromagia, um, death magic. Um,
Damn,
and
that's
it's
a
one of those, and it's one of those, um, or necromancy, as they say. Um, so it's just one of those topics where it's you go into it expecting it to be a very dark thing, but like in ancient cultures, it's actually the opposite. It's more of a, like, I wouldn't call it sunny, but I'd say it's more of a positive outlook on things. So
yeah.
I think that's I think now, things like, what is that movie where they find the Necronomicon and then they like wake up the dead, and the dead are
Evil Dead. Classic.
Evil Dead. Stupid
Share the
fucking
same
movie.
name. Ash. What? Hey,
Stupid fucking movie. It's the dumbest shit I've ever seen.
it is the dumbest humor, but it is so good.
It's
And
dumb. I haven't seen anything that stupid since
interesting.
the Hillary Clinton sex tape. So anyway, so when you look at, what? Jeez, get a hold of
God.
yourself. So when you look at something like necromancy, you do imagine, very dark, and because it's just a societal thing, it's got to be dark and spooky, but it wasn't the case, back in the day. Like, for example, there's a lot of schools of thought on communicating with the dead. For example, one of the things that I was studying said that certain cultures, I believe it was the Babylonians. The was it the Babylonian? Let's see, Babylonia, Ashurbanipal. Yeah,
You know, you
Babylonians.
said that
So,
in a sing-song voice. Can you do that one more time?
no, I cannot do such thing. I do not have puffy nipples. So it's one of those things where they believe that everybody has the ability to communicate with the dead, but they lose it. Like, not just communicating with the dead in general, but also the magical realm. Like,
Yeah.
everybody loses that ability, and so it's not something that they saw as special. If that makes sense, like, oh, that person communicates with the dead. Oh, okay. It wasn't something that was ever. No, I mean, it would be the equivalent of you being in an institution where everyone's in a wheelchair, right? And and then you look
Right.
at somebody and it's like everybody's in a wheelchair, and you look at somebody and it's like, that person walked at some point, and everybody's like, okay, so did we at some point before we got into an accident. It's the same thing. It's like, that person communicates with the dead, or like, yeah, so what? I could do it as a kid too, but I lost it. And I wonder if that is why children are more susceptible to, seeing a lot of the things that we no longer see.
Oh, definitely.
So it and what's interesting is that it's just one of those things where when you're a kid and the world is just so
It's new.
magical.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
look at
because
things
it's new.
differently.
And then society, especially in a culture like ours, or, you know, society very slowly begins to tell you, like, stop looking at the sky, stop looking at the
Not
trees,
real. Focus on
just
school. This is all you're meant to do right now.
focus focus on this indoctrination station. Just hurry up and then just read, and then eventually it's almost like the world goes from this colorful thing. They train you to look at it in black and white, and then you step out there and everything's just black and white. You just lose that wonder, you
It's
know.
sad, really.
And then there was an experiment where they did in the 1930s with rats. How they would have rats and they would time them, and these rats had to run through this maze and get to the cheese. And as soon as if you whoever got to the cheese first didn't get electrocuted. You know, they would zap them if you were last. Yeah, and the whole point was to
No.
create. Well, the whole point was to create this situation of high stress for the rat, and then the rats didn't sleep well. The rats didn't do this because they knew as soon as the ding of the bell, they would just take off running,
Oh,
and they would take off running. That's when get shot. you know, and what's interesting is they looked at the rat that won, and the rat that did not get shocked, his heart rate was still going fast, stress, constant stress.
well,
Um,
yeah,
the
because
only
he
time,
had to hurry and get to that cheese so he wouldn't get freaking electrocuted. I'd be stressed out
yeah.
too.
So what was interesting is that when what they called that experiment,
No.
that was the rat race, which is why they say in society when you're over there, you're trying to get ahead in life and you're trying to get this promotion, you work yourself to
Oh,
death, you're stressed, you wake up in the morning, they say, well, welcome to the rat race. And that's what it actually comes from, that old experiment. It's just a stress. Even when you achieve it, you achieve your thing,
I
you're not
quit
like,
right.
I yeah, it's not like I can finally rest. It's like, holy shit, I better stay on top, or I better, because there's always that threat that you're always replaceable. So
Don't work in
it's just,
insurance, people.
yeah, and it's the same concept. So that's why there's another saying that I like that says, even if you win the rat race, you just have to realize that you're still a rat. You know,
Yeah.
so I'm not getting off topic. It's just an example of how society begins to kind of take away the magical aspects of things. So when you see somebody who's you know in a situation where they're so stressed that they're borderline about to stroke, when they go to therapy, they're like, just go outside, don't think about
Breathe.
anything, just breathe, go outside and take in the scenery. And they sit them down in like this nice little garden area or the grass or just whatever, and they look around and they're kind of like, this is nice, and it's not new. You just forgot, like,
Yeah.
this is what you should have been feeling this whole time. Just you know so anyway,
I
so
have a cousin that actually recently wrote a book all about helping kids refine that magic in their life. She was a children's counselor for years, quit her job, and wrote this book. And I think she just released it on Amazon. And
oh,
it's all
nice. So
about,
I have to give a shout out when it's out.
yeah, let me look
um
it up real fast. It's
uh,
called,
use the promo code malt liquor.
okay, it's called Unlocking Magic Ish's Superconscious Awakening by Sheena Ogden.
Oh, nice. So yeah, shout outs. So
Yeah.
anyway, so in a society where that kind of stuff is taken away, people realize that there's something missing. They begin to kind of crawl back to the magic, if that makes sense. And they do it in many different ways. You know.
Yeah, but you have those people that do crawl back to that, but then the people that don't crawl back to that are the ones that are telling that person, oh, that's silly. Don't do that. That's dumb. Don't do that.
Yeah, and
See
it's
what I
like,
mean?
why are you
So
doing it?
there's so many
You're
tools.
wasting your time. Get walk
Exactly.
through. Come on, and it's just a society mind control. Have you ever gone to a bank and and there's no one there? And then, okay, this is a true story. I went to a bank one time and there was no one there, and they had those stupid little things that divide you. Where you're supposed to like go through, and walk around. There was no one there,
Oh
and
my
instead of me going
God.
around walking to the front, I just like walked and I turned, and then I was like, "This is mind control. Like no one's here. No one's here. I'm doing a stupid little thing where you go like, you know, look at just walk straight." So then, ever since that day, I made a promise myself. Even if there's a room full of people in the bank and I'm walking through, I'm just walking through it like I'm RoboCop, and I'm just like I just won a race in a marathon. When you walk through the thing, and then the thing like breaks when you walk through. That's what I do. I just walk through that. I'm dragging like 15 poles behind me. Anyway,
So
so
I'm honestly just thinking of where you live and picturing this bank with this, and I'm just what?
um, anyway, back to the topic. So so with the whole thing with communication with the dead, there's a lot of different methods that people use in different cultures. Um, one of these methods is what they call speculum, mirror magic.
Oh, okay.
Um,
I was like, what did
so
you just say?
you should say it dirty. I said the magic code word. Um, lucky loots to get 10% off your first purchase from Loot by Lottie. So yeah, so that no, so what it entails is you shut off the lights, stare into the mirror in the darkness. You just stare and you're slowly reciting to who you want to talk to. And then eventually you're able to see your reflection begin to kind of change. Um, in psychology, in psychology, they've done this experiments many times, and we're actually able to replicate it. They said that your brain is just not understanding what's going on, so it's just distorting the image. That's why you're able to see, a different image, your reflection. Which to me is kind of like, but why would you get the face of someone else? Like when you know what I mean?
It's all about psychology.
You
If
you think
you're
that
constantly, so it's, I mean, not a very good example, but an example. If you're constantly telling yourself something, you're going to believe that something. So if you're staring into a mirror and constantly saying somebody else's name and you're picturing that image, then I could see it.
all right, well, here's a case. Okay, well, here's a case for you. Then you explain it away. So there was
I'm the Oracle.
a
I
group
know
of
everything.
a group of young ladies were at a sleepover, and they did that mirror thing, and they looked into the mirror. One of them
Were they
saw the face of their aunt. What?
I said, were they being naughty?
Probably. I don't know. They're probably high. Um, so so they looked into the mirror, and then one of them said that they began to kind of see the face of their aunt, and her aunt just kind of she said that she saw the face of her aunt, and her aunt told her she loved her. She
Oh,
was like, "I love you," So she's like, "Okay, that's fucking weird," whatever. So then, what did you see? And then the phone rings, and her aunt had just committed suicide. They let her know they just found her.
God.
They found her, and I guess she was like really like close to her. So if if it's like psychology and everything, like how do you explain something like that in that instance when you see that person talks to you, a person you weren't even thinking about, and then all of a sudden they tell you that
But
that
it's
they
more
love
of
you.
the paranormal side than the psychology side.
Well, yeah. So that was like the point I was
I think
trying to
there's
make.
two
It's like,
different
well, yeah,
sides.
it's not. So yeah, and the whole psychology side of it is the person like looking into the mirror and being like, hey, I lost my aunt today. Like a completely different thing. This story.
Yeah,
This
but I can definitely see where there's instances where, there is the more paranormal aspect of it. What's that one mirror? God damn it. It's in a haunted mansion in the South. There's a mirror that has a screaming lady come through it.
the is it
I know
the
you
the
don't want to.
one in the is it the one in the bar or the one in the plantation?
The plantation, but it's not the
There's one in a
plantation
plant.
that just burned down.
No, no, no. The South has a lot of plantations, but so this mirror, um, it was considered cursed. They supposedly somebody was doing, and this is one of the stories. Like I said, there's a lot of stories to one thing. The
Yeah.
the story is that somebody was trying to communicate with the dead, and they went in by themselves, and they said, "Hey, don't do this alone. You have to have somebody with you." And this, she was warned by a group of witches, group of voodoo witches from the South. Yeah.
God.
So they're like, "Don't
Really
do it alone."
scared.
So didn't listen. I guess did it, by herself. In the morning, they found her dead. She was just laying in front of the mirror. When they asked, like, "What do you think happened?" Like, "What do you think happened?" And one of the explanations was, whatever was on the other side just pulled her in, and now she's trapped in this mirror.
Ugh,
So the screaming lady is somebody trying to get out. You know.
that would
So
suck.
yeah, so being trapped in a yeah, can you imagine? You're trapped in this
No.
mirror. Somebody walks up like some skinny teenage kid, and he's like flexing in front of the mirror, and he's just like, ooh, and he's like popping his zits, all over you, and you're like, ah, stop, please.
Gross.
Um, so that's one of the methods of communicating with the dead was that way. Um,
Yeah,
Another method that everybody's very familiar with is through the talking board, the Ouija board.
the Ouija board, my
That's
favorite.
so, and you've had experience with this. So
I have actually never used a Ouija board. I want
you've never
to,
used the.
but I haven't.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, my
Have you
grandmother
have you
has.
been around it?
Mm-mm.
Never been around. Jeez.
No, nobody
All right.
has.
Well,
Okay, so here's the thing. I know. Okay, so my mom told me that my grandma's cousin, they were playing with a Ouija board. The Ouija board predicted her death was the same day that they were on, like whatever day it was that it was, I guess, if that makes sense. Anyways, so they got into a car accident that night. My grandma's cousin was the only one that was killed. So my mom has the stigma with Ouija boards. Don't mess with Ouija board. But I think a Ouija board is a great tool if you know how to use it right. But if you're leaving it open and you're not
yeah,
using it
and
correctly, then yeah, you're going to call upon shit you're not going to want in your house, dude.
yeah, and that's another one of it's the same under the same thing as the mirror. Like you don't know what you're doing. Like back to the screaming lady, sucked into
Yeah.
the mirror, didn't know what she was doing. So, and what's insane is that people say the Ouija board was invented by Hasbro, but it's actually not true. They had
No.
yeah, they've had different methods of it. Like they've had what looks like a Ouija board in Egypt, in ancient Egypt, and it was same thing, symbols and everything. And then people would
Hmm.
basically they would interlock their fingers, and then when they would interlock their fingers like this, they would put a device like in between the fingers that they were all holding, and that device would move, and basically that's how they would talk. Um,
Oh, I didn't know that.
in yeah, in Greece, they had oracles, and these were so they had yeah they had oracles, and they had different types of oracles. So you had the oracles that were more Like I usually always go back to her because she's such an interesting character. I can't believe that history has not done too much on her. But Alexander's mom, Olympus, and
Oh,
she was a an oracle under the banner of Dionysus, which were these very dark, dirty witches. And the way that they would do it is they would communicate with the dead by interlocking their arms. And they would interlock their arms. Imagine somebody coming over and then interlocking their arm this way. And here they would hold like a pendulum on top of fine sand. So they would all interlock and they would all just begin to sway, and they would all just begin to sway, and they're swaying back and forth. And as they're swaying back and forth, this pendulum is actually writing symbols in the sand. So then they would all
okay.
just wait until whatever was communicated with them selects a specific oracle to translate what was written. So, and the way that they described it was that she would stand up and be in a trance. Her eyes would roll to the back of her head, and she would just begin to whisper, as whatever it is speaking through her, and then she whispers, to a selected sister, and then that sister would translate what she said. They'd be like, she said, and that's how they would communicate with the dead, doing it that way. And a lot of the times they said that when it was something that was urgent, they would take bone, they would char it, and they would grind that up, and then that's what they would basically place on the ground to like as a surface for them to write on. So
Oh, that makes sense.
yeah, they would interlock their arm, which is interesting too, because if you ever seen somebody utilize a Ouija board or anything of that nature, it always seems to sway. That's the
Yeah.
one thing that I always found interesting. No matter what book you read, when it talks about like ancient practices, those that give utterance to the dead. Um, any device that they utilize or any technique always involves some type of swaying motion, whether it's a pendulum, whether it's you interlocking your fingers, or even if it's your whole body swing. And I wonder what that is. Like what is it? And these were civilizations
Mhm.
that. So, for example, a lot of people say, well, Egypt and Greece had a relationship under Alexander the Great because Alexander the Great ended up conquering Egypt, but these predates contact with Alexander. So, and I think they
I
predate
almost
Alexander by 400 years. So
I
it
almost
can't be
think that
like, well,
sweating is more natural though. Because if you think about it, if you're like just sitting there and you're sitting in the same position for a while, somebody always like I do it naturally. I start swaying naturally. So maybe
I
it's just
don't.
because it's a more of a natural motion than it is to just be like,
I
you know what
sit
I
so
mean?
still. I sit so still that randomly people walk up to me and they just kind of like feel to see if I'm alive. And I just look at them and
Probably
I'm
aren't.
like, I'm alive. I'm alive, bitch.
You're
It's just
super savvy.
I'm just not swaying because I'm as solid as a rock. So it's just one of those things where it's just I don't understand. The swaying to me is very, very interesting because it's like, okay, where does that come from? But like you said, it's rhythm. It could be rhythm. Remember, we interviewed a gentleman, part of the shout out to the paranormal hunters. He was talking about how he believes that energy, especially the energy of the dead, it's attached to string theory where everything moves as a wave, and through
Mm-hmm.
sound. And the one thing that
What?
sound, yeah, the one thing that sound does to people, I mean, especially rhythmic, is they'll sway like your axle rose, and you're just swaying away your problems. You know,
Oh, calm
so like
down.
I'm swaying away my problems. So it
Bringing out the refried dreams here.
okay, yeah, Refi Dream. Nah, I shot everybody. Um, after I called ice. So it's just one of those things. Like that's another method is the talking board, the spirit board. Another method was they used to have. Okay, so what's interesting is there was a book called Caesar that was written. It's my favorite book. It's a book called Caesar, and it was written by Julius Caesar. And there's like 19 volumes. You know, yeah, it's a lot.
Would be your favorite book.
So it's awesome because it's almost as if as imagine watching Star Wars, but the person that's telling the story and narrating the story is Darth Vader because you have Julius Caesar and he's telling his story, you know, and his conquest. So what's awesome about it is that Caesar speaks in a third person. You know, he says Caesar did this, and then Caesar went here, even though he himself is the one that's writing it. So there was a man. Okay, and I talked about this before on the show. So there was a man who was basically as close as you can get to Gandalf, you know, like from Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
So yeah, and he was this man that was from the Order of the Aldui, and that was like a pagan tribe that was there, and they had him as a slave. They forced him to tell fortunes and anything like that. And so
Oh.
yeah, so that was his whole thing. That's how he survived. So this was a guy that did this kind of magic. So and he would randomly have visions. So he would do this thing where they would stab somebody, an enemy, pull out the sword, and he would count the death rolls. You know, he's sitting there and then he's like, he's paying attention, and then he would have them pull the body. Levicius was his name. So they pulled his name, and then the blood, you know, splattered, and he would interpret the blood, you know, and he would interpret the blood. This is what this means. So this is what's crazy is that one of my favorite stories from this individual. They did this kind of magic, and he was telling them like the dead are speaking to me. And Caesar and people started laughing, and Caesar like the next man that laughs will get beheaded or put up on a cross. Listen to what he says. Tell us your fortune. Tell us what you see. Tell us. Oh, Gandalf. So it says that rolled back. His eyes rolled back, and he just starts speaking, and he's uttering. And they have a man that speaks his language. The language was come
Uh-huh.
on, man.
Come on.
It was the paint language because these were a tribe of people. Paint. These people were paint
It's
themselves
almost
blue.
got
You know, you've seen them
roots.
before. So anyway, that's what this guy spoke. So he's speaking, and this guy's translating, and he says, "There's a boar, and this boar is in the forest, and then a wolf comes, and this wolf devours this boar." That was it. That was the end of it. And they're like, "What the fuck does that mean?" So they're going to war. They're going to war with these tribes, with these Celts. They're going to war with these Celts, and they're going to war with these Picts. They have like all these group of people. They're going to, and their symbol was the boar. People that follow the way of Osatru actually have a boar tattoo when you see in your 35th winter. It's like they do it now, and it's like, all right, bitch, you've never fucking survived your 35th winter out there fighting to the death. All that,
So
shut the
mean.
hell up. What? Because I know
So
nobody
mean.
does that. Well, because they're sitting there drinking their latte, and it's like, get the fuck out of here.
They're drinking their
So, so anyway, so he tells this fortune, right? So they went to war with these tribes. So then they get to this village ready to fight this war against this tribe of people. All of a sudden, this whole village is burned to the ground, and they're
Oh
like,
no.
what the fuck happened? Because they were gonna fight these people. They're like, we're ready. We brought our, everything. We're ready to fight. What is going on? Yeah, exactly. That's how they fought too. So they're getting ready to fight, and they get there, and everybody's dead. So then they're like, what the fuck is going on? And then and this is according to Caesar, out of these ruins and out of the smoke comes this giant of a man. This was the very first time the Romans ever encountered their Germanic tribes. These Germanic tribes were men of the mountains. They were gigantic. They were described as a barbarian to barbarians. If you thought these men were barbarian, these men were that much worse. So the average Roman at that time was like 5'5", 5'6", like my height. I would have fit in with people. 5'5", 5'6". The tribes that they were fighting, these Celts, these people were like 5'9", 6 foot. These Germanic men were 6'4" to 6'6",
Oh shit.
gigantic, and their leader comes through. Um, their leader walks through, and he's painted himself blue. Artaegon was this guy's name. He's got blue stripes, and on his head,
Sorry.
he had what? What'd you say?
I said Smurf.
On and on his head, yeah, basically. So then on his head, he's got
Yeah.
this headdress that it's a wolf skin. So he's got a wolf skin headdress on,
Oh, that's sick.
and yeah, he's got this wolf skin headdress, and then the wolf like pelt as clothing. And then Caesar looks at him, and he said, "This is the barbarian to barbarians." And he says, thus making Lavicious he made sense of Lavicious vision. This wolf went through and devoured the boar. These people, they that was their symbol, was the boar, right? Their tribe, they're fighting. They've been fighting these tribes for years. All of a sudden, here comes these people identified as the wolf and just mauls them. So yeah, so that was his vision. So anyway, so that guy was
I
really
need to read
interesting.
this.
So
Damn.
yeah, no, you should. It's a great read. Anyway, so you have that was another form, and he says that he spoke to his dead ancestors to see the future through blood because blood begets blood. So that's how they did it. What's interesting, what I like about Caesar, we're probably losing my audience here, but what I like about Caesar is the fact that Caesar was very um, superstitious, and he was very superstitious,
Lesbian.
but he was very biased. So he had these magicians, and he would watch people do their magic, and he was doing their magic, and then he scoffed at it. He was like, look at these barbarians and their stupid beliefs. By the way, if you want somebody to really read your future, I got a couple guys back in my kingdom. So it was like that. It was like that kind of that
What?
was like that kind of thing. He was like, their magic is so, I cannot believe. Look how superstitious these barbarians are. They're so
But I
barbaric.
got
But by
these
the way, if you,
people in my
yeah,
house.
but I got these people. You know. So yeah. So anyway,
I mean, he's
so
just trying to brag.
so what's interesting is that you have this kind of things to foretell the future. It was seen as something that it was so sought after. You know, people
Yeah,
would
because
go,
people wanted to know their future, and back then
but
it was
then
all
they,
about the future.
yeah, it was about the future, but they utilized the dead to tell them the future. So they had
Yeah,
people that specialized in that type of magic, and
I
it,
want to
and it's just one of those
specialize
things.
in that.
Okay, so we're getting to the dark side of that. So then
I want
there's
to work on
so the downside to all of that is the fact that then you have people that and I think again we talked about this with that gentleman about how some people just don't know how to turn the volume up or down or the off switch to their radio. So you have people that don't know how to tune that out. So all hours of the day, something is talking to them. All hours of the day, they see someone. All hours of the day, all hours of the night, it doesn't matter. And it's almost like a beacon. Like these people want to talk so bad to someone
their
that,
lighthouses.
yeah, they see this one person, are like, I can tell this person, you know.
Hmm.
And then they go to them at night, and they're just like, hey, can you just give a message to Charlie?
Mm.
And you're like, okay, what do you want me to
What's
tell Charlie?
Charlie?
Tell him he's gay. And then it so, like you don't know, but you know what I mean? Like, could you imagine if you if you were in the world where everybody just spoke sign language and there was no like verbal anything, and you're the only one, and no matter how much you talk to these people and they're like signing, or they can't hear you, and then finally you see one person and that person's like, oh man, you're like, holy shit, you
You
can
talk?
talk too. You talk. And then, like, what is your reaction? Are you gonna be like, ugh, somebody else talking, or are you gonna be excited and be like, damn, I haven't talked to anyone in years? You
Mm.
know?
I think I'd
So
be like, shut up. It was nice when it was quiet.
yeah, no, I don't think so. Look at you, can't even stay quiet on this podcast. So so
You talk more than
anyways,
anybody.
well, yeah, I have to. Otherwise, my brain will explode in this podcast will end. So it's just one of those things where they were really sought after. Like, for example, when you get um, the book of Samuel, first book of Samuel in the Bible, and you get Saul, King Saul, right? King Saul goes and, the prophet that was speaking to him, basically, he dies because he begins to do things that were not, that God didn't want him to do. So, you know, this prophet said, because this prophet, this king, he was getting his advice from this prophet and this prophet from God. So he begins to basically um,
Hearsay.
commit the what? Well, no, he begins to commit atrocities
Sorry.
towards people that, So God was telling him, hey, when you conquer this land, take them in as your own. Do not hold any grudges, for these people will aid you in expanding your kingdom. And then King Saul was like, these people were my enemies. I'm not going to show any pity. So he begins to kill them and rob them. So
Yes.
he's conquering these people. Well, he begins to slaughter women and children too. They had nothing to do.
That's
So then,
God.
so he begins to do these things, and so then Samuel comes up to him, and Samuel was the prophet, and then he said, "You have rejected the Lord as your king, and now you have rejected the Lord as your God, and now the Lord rejects you as king." And then Samuel dies. You know, he dies.
Fuck around and
So,
find out.
so the fact that Samuel died, is now his connection to God is gone. Now he doesn't have this advice, so he's on his own now. So he's just trying to make sense of things. He doesn't even speak the other people's language, which is what's insane. So he's out there, because there was like different tribes and they had their language. Samuel would basically translate for him, like this is what's going on here, and God says that. So he goes off and he put a couple years back, he put a ban on any type of witchcraft, especially those that utter to the dead. He says, get out of the land. You guys have been, instead of being placed what they call under the yoke, instead of like telling these people, like, all right, well, you're going to have to work. Instead, he's like, no, get the hell out of this land. So he banishes them from the land, right? So then he's desperate. And then he goes to this woman that was known as the Witch of Endor. And he goes and he disguises himself. And and he goes to this witch and he knocks on her door and he says, hey, um, can you bring up the spirit of Samuel, so that he can talk to me because Samuel's dead. And then this witch says, like, absolutely. And it says, and this is what it says in the Old Testament, that she saw visions going up and down. She saw souls. And then finally, the spirit of Samuel comes through. And then Samuel said, you know, cursed would you be, and you shall find an end to you, a miserable end. You and your son, you die by the hand of the uncircumcised. You know, and so that's what it says to him. And then the witch says, how have deceived me? You have come here, for you are Saul, the king of Israel. Immediately the witch is like, I know who you are. So then, anyways, long story short, he gets cursed, and he gets cursed. And then the old phrase says, so the witch told him, and you will fall by your own sword. You've heard that phrase before, right? Yeah, he fell on his own sword.
Yeah.
So so Saul is fighting this war against these tribes that are not, his people. So what he does is he's like, I refuse to get killed by these people. So instead, he places his own sword up to his stomach and hurls himself on it. So he dies by his, and it says, thus fulfilling the prophecy that was told that you will die by your own sword.
That
And
sounds real.
well, I mean, it was a dark time. So when you look at something like that, that's where we get the phrase "he fell on your own sword," and that's exactly what Saul did. He fell on his own sword. But anyways, here's um, another example of somebody like, damn, I need answers. Who can communicate with the dead? And they go and they seek them out. So another method of communicating with the dead is found in the rituals of voodoo or hoodoo, where somebody will go and that's where we get that. By the way, people, that's where we get the term spirits from. You know, when we have something like hard liquor, you know, spirits. It comes from that culture. Yeah. So what they would do is they would perform the ritual. They had their spells and incantations, and then they would take the hardest liquor they can find and just chug it. And they would
Cheers.
just begin to, yep. They just begin to chug, yeah, chugging
It
that,
seems like
Colt
to get
45.
along.
Um,
Cool 45.
so
No.
they would chug it, and then they would, become very intoxicated, and then they would begin to, what they say, they would begin to vomit out phrases, not literally like vomit. That's just what they said because the way the words came out,
Oh,
they came out. So they would begin to speak, and as
drunken
soon as the
warriors,
message
clever
was,
thoughts.
yeah. So as soon as the words, as soon as they were done with the message, right, the message was over, and then this person would fall onto a chair. Well, okay, if you were inexperienced and the people you surrounded yourself with were inexperienced, you would fall to the ground and your head would bounce off the ground. If you were experienced in that type of thing and you had people that you actually trusted, what they would do is they would take a chair, and as soon as they felt like the message was almost over, they would kind of push the chair into you and you'd fall back on the chair. And there was a great book. It's called The Serpent and the Rainbow. And The Serpent and the Rainbow was a Stephen King book, and it was about the whole voodoo practice and the zombie and all that kind of stuff, and then that type of dark magic. So, but the book is not just based on his own imagination. The book is actually based on a college professor that actually went to this culture to go investigate what was going on, in
Oh
this culture.
no
So, yeah, so you can actually find those papers online. They're really interesting.
way. Yeah, because
Um,
I thought every single book of his was based on either something he just thought of or like a dream that he had had, something to that effect.
or that, or that sweet cocaine helping them give them inspiration.
Mushrooms.
Yeah. So it's funny. Stephen
Anyway,
King said that. He said that when he wrote the book, he doesn't remember writing the book Carrie. That's how fucked up on drugs he was. He's like, yeah. He's like, I don't remember writing this book at
Carrie
all.
is a fucked up book and movie. So you know what? I think it would take somebody on
He,
drugs to come up with that.
he said that he was surprised with the ending because I don't remember writing this. So he was like, holy shit. To me, the scariest movie and the scariest book I've ever read is actually Cujo. Um,
Is that one is terrifying. I am sorry, but that
yeah, because the concept
one
of a
of those
dog.
the one book of his that got me, The Black House. Have you read that one?
No.
I'll have you borrow that one.
All
I
right.
haven't read it in a long
Well,
time, but it got me.
gotta
It's
write
good.
it down. Okay, wrote it down. Anyway, so
No.
in his notes, he said that he saw this person, about to chuck, and he was a professor, right? And he's like, okay, and he says, let me see that bottle. So they handed him the bottle, and he's looking at it, and then he does this thing where he pours it on the dirt, and then he takes a lighter, lights it, blue flame, just in the air. It's like, okay, this is booze, because he thought that it was going to be just like a trick, a parlor trick. So so this woman, she's the one that was chosen by the grandpapa, the main priest, the voodoo priest, and he's
Oh,
like, "You've been selected to speak, so you tonight will pass the spirit." So she says, she takes this bottle and she chugs it and chugs it and chugs it, and this guy's like, she is gonna go blind or die of alcohol poisoning. This is insane. So she begins to utter, and he's like, wow, the effects of the alcohol are taken so quick. And she's talking and she's uttering and she begins to say things to the professor about his past. And these were, again, people are like, oh, it's easily debunked. They could have looked up. This is before the internet, people. It's like 1970s. So, and this is a third world country, by the way. So this is Haiti, like they didn't even have electricity. So, and so they begin to say things, and he's like, okay, how did you know I had this dog? How did you know this dog's name? Like, how did you know how my father died? How did you know that I went through a dark phase? So anyway, so this person, after they're done uttering, they fall back on a chair. And he says that this person, and he said, I feared for this person. So he walked up to this person and tried to see if they're okay. Get up. He says, sober. He's sober, stands up, and is just kind of like looking around, confused. And this guy's like, what is. And he talked about how, with his amazement, people were like, no, she passed the spirit. She drank it. The spirit walked through her and spoke through her. And now he's gone.
Okay, that makes sense.
So
Where you get
the
that
term,
from.
yeah, spirits. So
Interesting.
anyway, so that was another form of communication through that. And then you have um there's a practice where there is very specific god. I think his name was Limba. And everybody sees him like, oh, people are afraid of voodoo. It's actually a beautiful practice and blah, 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 like this.
Why have I
You know how
not
you
heard of this?
summon you know how you summon this individual?
How? Because I've never heard of him.
You take a snake, all right? A snake that's alive, you take a blade and you gut it and then you throw it into the fire. And
Why?
then that's how he comes
Snake?
forward. So whenever I see people when they're kind of like, it's such a beautiful religion, it gets a bad rap. Like these people, you know, do these kind of horrible things. But then again, I mean, in any so a friend of
Why
mine
is it
had just
always
found out
snakes
that
though?
okay, so because they believe this is where the term the serpent and the rainbow comes from,
Damn it.
was that they were two. It was a god and a goddess. The goddess took the form of a snake, and the god took the form of a rainbow. And I forget the names of these things, but that's how they existed. Whenever you'd see the snake, you'd see a rainbow, and that's how they would communicate with each other, and they were in love. So, in a way for you to actually invoke this god to speak to you, you have to basically sacrifice the one thing that represents what he loved, and that's this god is in the form of a snake. So, what's dangerous about this practice is they believe that if you did not get the desired outcome, like this is not the spirit I wanted, this thing can actually take a hold of you and hold you prisoner, and you're convulsing on the ground, and you become demonically possessed. And at that point, you get what they call a bembe, which a bembe is a stronger spirit. It's like we need to summon a stronger spirit to come in and beat the shit out of this spirit so I can let it go. So yeah, exactly. So that's what it's called. It's called a bembe. So it's bigger.
I'm laughing
So,
about to beat the shit out of the spirit.
well, yeah, that's basically what it was. So this person is convulsing in the ground, and foam is coming out of their mouth, and their eyes are rolling back, and they're just convulsing, and they get a bembe, and then this bembe, basically goes into this person's body, and like basically rips out this spirit, and then this person is cured. And
Sounds like a possession.
well, yeah, exactly. So it's just one of those things where this person becomes possessed by an unclean spirit. So there's actually an episode of Blue Bloods where the episode is, that show Blue Bloods. It's
I've
got Tom
heard of it, but
Selleck.
never seen
It has
it. Do I need to
Donnie
watch it?
Wahlberg. Yeah, it's pretty badass.
Okay,
Um,
I'll have to watch
so so in that episode, it's like a voodoo episode, and this detective, goes in and sees a possession, and they're gonna summon a spirit to help him, and he's watching it, and he's like, and the spirit goes in and basically like takes the spirit out, and it's a show. It's not a superstitious show at all. It's not about magic or anything. It's just a cop show. And as soon as
it.
he
Okay.
sees this, he's confused, and he's like, "What the hell just happened?" And that's how the episode ends. He's like,
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's how that one
Did
episode
it
ends.
just
He's just like,
leave
what the
you
hell
with a
just.
cliffhanger?
Well, yeah, because he didn't believe in all this voodoo stuff, and then this happens in front of him, and he's like, "What the hell?" And that's the end of the episode. So,
Now I don't want to watch it.
no, it's a good show. You should check it out. You will not regret it. So, so yeah, so that's another method. Um, so
What is
in
your favorite method?
of communication with the dead,
Yeah, do you have a favorite method, Mr. Superstitious?
I'm not superstitious. I don't
You
like
are.
it. I don't
Really?
like it. But if I were to choose the most interesting method to me of how some people communicated, damn, what would be my favorite?
Wow, you're really putting deep thought into this.
Yeah, I'm going through all of these methods.
Wow, I
I
didn't know you
guess
would
it.
put this much thought into it.
Okay, it's actually a spell. So what you need
Ooh, is it a
is a
spell I should do tomorrow?
no. So
Damn it,
what you
I'm
need
gonna do it.
what what you need is a bowl,
Okay,
right? What you need is a bowl. Fill it up with water. You
okay,
light four candles around it. You take some oil, doesn't matter what kind. A lot of people use olive oil because it's cheap, you know. So you put a couple drops and you look into it and you speak into it and you ask a question. And a lot of the question comes through like, and this is how you ask it. It says,
okay.
if anyone in my lineage, through my bloodline, wants to come forth and speak to me, it is now the time for you to come and speak to your, you know, to your family member, to your bloodline, to your kin. And you take this bowl and you look into it in the dark, and somebody on the other side will talk to you. And some people say that, I don't know how true this is, but some people say you could take this bowl and do this and hold it up in the air like that, and the water doesn't spill like a mirror, and that person on the other side is speaking to you, and that you can have a full
That
fledged
is
conversation. And then you put the bowl down when you're done speaking, and then the moment that you blow out the candles, you see the image just disperse, like, and then that's it.
I have to tell you something really weird that just happened.
What?
When you did the energy disperse thing, my entire computer screen glitched.
Yeah, well, it's a coincidence. Anyway,
Can you not put spells on my computer?
the what?
It's the only one I have. If you could not put a spell on my computer to fuck it up, it's the only computer I have. So I'm
I
gonna
have
need
no
you.
magic.
Well, you just
I
didn't have a
haven't.
screen glitch.
Well, that's a coincidental. So that's probably my favorite method. Is because
Good.
there's a story tied to it. Um,
Okay.
the story is about two brothers, right? And these brothers want answers to their questions, and they go and they see a witch. It's like, how can I get these answers? And so then and stop me if you've heard this before, but the reflection is supposed to show you what you most desire. And so,
Are you talking about Harry Potter?
well, that's what, like I said, like this is going to sound really familiar, but that's where that comes from, by the way.
That was
So,
my instant thought was the mirror in Harry Potter. I believe it's Chamber of Secrets.
I don't know. I'm not gay. I don't watch that. Anyway, so you have these two brothers. So can't make me do shit. So you have two brothers, and and they're looking into this spell that this witch told them to do. Right, like this is how you do something. So then it says that the first brother leans in and he does the spell, and he's talking to his deceased mother, and his deceased mother is talking, having a conversation. The second brother, who was known as being very vain, sees nothing but his own reflection and basically stares into his own reflection so much that he drowns himself.
Is that something you would do?
What?
Stare into
Just
your own
drown
reflection
myself?
and just be like, okay, okay. Oh shit.
No, I don't do that. Actually, I look like I've been dead for 4 years. Anyway, so that's like one of the stories attached to that is the story of the two brothers and the fact that one of them was so vain they drowned themselves. Also, in the movie Hook, remember he looks into his own reflection and he sees himself as a young man. So basically, same concept. It all stems from that. So it's because he wanted to see what he does. Anyway, so yeah, that's I don't know why. Like to me, it's so like that's as mystical as it gets. It's the old spell with the water and the oil because Caesar speaks about that, and how his mystics would do that. They would answer questions, what battle formations, and he says, and then came forth the men with the water and oil. So and then they would tell him like how do you attack. So I think that to me is like probably my favorite method because when you look at how romantic that is, just like idea of you coming forward and then speak, and it's not just anyone. You're asking for help from your ancestors. Somebody
Yeah,
come through, and you summon them through your birthright, I guess, of you being like, I am your kin. You deserve to talk to me.
I should do that more.
So yeah. So if you ask my favorite method, that's probably it. But there was so
Yeah,
many. I mean,
that's
there's the tossing of the bones. There's the runes with the blood, or the old Celtic way of doing it, like Scottish. They would set a horse on fire while it's alive, and then wherever it ran, when it was on fire, it would leave a like a giant mark on the ground, and that's how they would interpret the future.
mm-hmm.
Um, you know what's interesting is,
That would be my
uh,
ancestors.
yeah, just setting a horse on fire.
Good God. Maybe that's why I have such a sick, demented mind.
Yeah, maybe. And then that whole area eventually was colonized by Christians, and then they're like, "You guys need to stop setting these horses on fire." Like, you guys, like,
You know what?
it's like,
Don't come in and tell us what to do. It's none of your
well, I
business.
mean, it was a humanitarian thing. Like, these things are alive, and the concept was
I am
that they
totally
didn't.
kidding. I would
That
never condone that.
Yeah, so it's like you guys need to stop setting these things on fire. Um,
So evil. I would cry, in all honesty.
but it was also like you also got to think that to them, as much as they prize, because they did prize these horses, they were valuable, but to them, it's like, I need this more than I need you. I need my fortune told, and then that's how they would do it. They would set these horses on fire. Oh, anyway, so it got me off track. So Napoleon Bonaparte, right? The famous French general. You know,
Yeah, but I thought you were gonna say Napoleon Dynamite. I really did. I'm sorry, go on.
so Napoleon Bonaparte was a great general. His brother actually came to the United States to hunt the Jersey Devil. I don't know if you knew that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was a bounty on the Jersey Devil, and he came down and he came down. He's like, I'm gonna hunt it. He brought cannons. He brought soldiers. Yeah. So
We need to do an episode on the Jersey Devil.
hey, episode from Jersey. You just talk about Snooky.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Um.
Snooki's my
So
homie.
okay, this is the story. Okay. So when you look at your palm, you have a line, right? Right here. This is called the line of destiny. And the longer your line, the longer your life. So what's interesting is I don't know how much it is. So I have a scar that connects to that line right there, and it goes all the way down my wrist. Anyway, so
Wait,
Napoleon,
this one here,
yeah,
or is it this? Oh,
no, it's
nice.
this one. It's this
Go.
one. It's this one right here. Goes down.
Okay, go on.
So anyway, so he goes to this fortune teller, and his fortune teller's like, "This is the line of destiny." And he goes, "Okay," and he says his line went from here to here, really short. So then she said, "You're not going to have a long life because your line of destiny is so short." So then Napoleon, being Napoleon, said, "For I was destined," and it's again the writers so romantic, like the language so romanticized, and he said, "For my destiny is of greatness. Who are you to tell me that it is not?" So he takes a knife and he begins to carve a line down his hand, and he formed a scar on his hand,
Maybe I should
and
do
then
that.
that, and then well, I mean, I don't condone that, but so he ended up carving his own line because he says, "For I am in control of my own destiny." So what's interesting is one of this is going to be the last thing because we got to end the show soon. So one of the interesting things is that you have Napoleon and he had a general. This is Napoleon back when he was just a captain. He wasn't even like king of France yet. So he has this general disguise himself, and he disguised himself as a merchant, and he goes to visit this tarot reader. And he was like, "I am but a poor merchant." He says, "Can you read me my fortune?" And she begins to do the cards. And she looks at me and she says, "You can lie to me." And this is written down, by the way. He wrote this down in his journal. He said, "You can lie to me, but you cannot lie to the cards." She says, "I am getting, and these cards tell me you're a very important person. You're not a merchant. And also, here I see is the wagon. And then here I see is the tower. Here I see is the emperor. It's like you're a man of war and you have a very high position." He says,
What
and then
was
here
the
you have
first
another
card?
card, the wagon.
Okay.
So, so,
Okay.
so this guy ended up saying, like, "Who do you say that I am?" And then she said, "I'm not saying anything. The cards are telling me you're a general in the military and you have a very high position." And the man
Hmm.
said, and this is a town, by the way, that he just stumbled on. It's not like he was known because back then he might have been known in his small town and he was high ranking in the town, but not in a different country, by the way. So imagine. So, so then he said, and then she told him, and I'm gonna deal cards for a companion that you have. And she deals cards, and she said, "And this man will one day be emperor, you know, and he is your right hand man, which you have bondage to, you know." And then he like gets up, he pays her, and he leaves. Do you know who his companion was that he had a bond to?
Tell me.
Nap- Napoleon Bonaparte became emperor of France. That's insane, huh? That's a, that's that's such a crazy story. Napoleon Bonaparte became
So
emperor
good
a
though.
year after a year, and
Jesus
yeah.
Christ.
And do you know why he disguised himself as a merchant?
I want to say so the psychic wouldn't be able to tell who he was and make assumptions, because that makes
That was
him not
part of
know
it, but it was
yourself.
because he was an individual that hated magic and didn't believe in it. So he was embarrassed that somebody was going to say, "By the way, this general came by and he asked me." He didn't want that, so I'm going to disguise myself as a merchant and I'm gonna come over here, and he says, and I want to ask if my campaign that I'm gonna launch within a year, if it's gonna be successful or not. So instead, I'm gonna disguise it as a merchant question. Will my business be successful? And her words were, "You can lie to me, but you cannot lie to the cards, for you are no merchant."
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So
I
a
mean, yeah.
great story. Anyway, all right, guys, that is it. So this episode was ridiculous. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's fine. When are we not ridiculous?
I don't know. Maybe when
Exactly.
I'm
Fine.
maybe
Who
when I'm
gives a
really
shit?
depressed. Who cares?
I'm
Anyway,
depressed.
done. So and also my neck is killing me. So anyway, guys, thank you guys for joining us for another episode. We're so happy to have you. Remember, guys, to check out Loot by Lottie. Use the promo code
Oh, yeah.
Lucky
I'm wearing
Loot.
one of her necklaces,
Oh yeah, look at that.
by the
That's
way.
actually really, it's actually
My
really nice.
favorite piece.
So
And
Loot by
she
Lottie,
has custom necklaces, guys. This one was only $28. I got to choose my own charms, and yeah, just it's so
oh,
worth it.
by the way, you can have them be enchanted. So
And she needs all the support right now.
yeah, it's a tough time for a lot of people, and
Yes.
so yeah, go ahead and support. So anyway, go ahead, head on over to T Public. Links in the description. Get yourselves a shitty piece of art. I just put up a Jeffrey Dahmer art piece, so you guys can check that
And
out.
I'm wearing. I don't even know if you have this shirt on there anymore. Do you still have this one on there?
Yeah,
Yeah, this one of them.
so,
I went all
so
out.
dumb.
I didn't even realize.
Yeah, that shit sucks. Anyways, um,
Get it?
no, I work hard on it. Anyway, so thank you guys for checking in on the episode, and remember, guys, to always look both ways, especially if you find yourselves on Nightmare Road.
That was terrifying. Bye.